Hey, everybody. This is another team training session for the Oklahoma Housing Needs Assessment. Today, we're going to discuss census geography. So let me get my screen sharing here. So like our other lessons, we're trying to relate all of our learning to our prototype flowchart. And today we're going to be talking about census geography, particularly the boundary data that we need to bring into our GIS software to make maps and do geospatial analysis. So when the Census Bureau collects data, it basically collects it on the individual and household level, but then it aggregates it, puts it together in various combinations. And this hierarchy that you see here is the census hierarchy for the way they aggregate data. And you can see in the middle there, there is sort of a spectrum with nation being the largest aggregation. And then the smallest aggregation of data is the census block area. And there's a bunch in between, but it's sort of the blocks build up to block groups, which build up to census tracts, which build up to counties, states, divisions, regions, and the nation, right? And so that's sort of the main sequence of data there. But you can also see there's a bunch of other sort of ways to aggregate the data. Some like zip code tabulation areas, are done on a nationwide basis, whereas things like places, which we'll also discuss, is done at the state level, and so on and so forth, right? So, the state of Oklahoma, which is right here, we're part of the South region, the West South Central Division. We're mainly going to be using state here and then counties, census tracts, block groups, and census blocks. And so I'll go through each one of those and show you a map of the state, so you can become familiar with that. Okay, so a very important consideration is identifying the different geographies. And the Census Bureau uses something called GeoIDs, or geographic identifiers, and there's a lot of technicalities that go along with GeoIDs, but I'm just going to hit sort of the main point. So first of all, it's very important to remember every piece of geography that the census identifies has its own GeoID. And as I said, if you're on that main sort of hierarchy, main spectrum there, they kind of build on one another. And you'll see that as we look at the different geographies. So the state of Oklahoma is 40. 40. So states always have two digits. So in this example on your screen, they're using Texas, which is 48. I don't know the order why we're 40 and they're 48. Neither one of us came into the union at that point, but that's an opaque decision that I don't really know much about. So let's just go ahead and dive in here and take a look. And so here's the state of Oklahoma for you, showing the 77 counties. And so we have 77 counties were created at statehood, and you can see them listed here by name. Each one of them has a individual GeoID. And over in the lower left-hand corner here is an example for Tulsa County. And you're going to see that there's 5 digits and the letters US. So most GeoIDs have this prefix that goes with them. It's usually truncated and removed so that we just are left with the 5 digits that are remaining there. But you may see them from time to time. If you don't download data, sometimes they'll give you both the full GeoID and then the truncated one there. So you can see there 40, that's our state. So all the counties in the state, their GeoID start with 40, and then they get a 3-digit number. And again, there's only 77 of them, so I don't know how Tulsa ended up with 143, but we did. And each one of the counties have their own initial ID like that. All right, moving on here now down to the next level. So each county is divided up into census tracts. So I selected a tract in Tulsa County. It happens to be the tract I lived in, which is tract 69.01. And this is its geo ID. And so you can see the 40143 is still there. But then there's a 6-digit code for the census tract, 006901. So the first 4 digits are for the number, and then the last 2 are on the right side of the decimal. And you say, well, why does a census tract have a decimal like that? Well, census tracts change with time. So the Census Bureau has a target of 4,000 people living in a census tract. That's just a target. Of course, they're not going to hit that all the time, but that's their ideal. And every 10 years, when the decennial census is done, they look at the population and then decide whether or not they should divide census tracts. So maybe there was a census tract that 10 years ago had 4,000 people. Now it has 12,000 people. So maybe they'll divide it into 2 or 3 tracts, and that's what the decimal place is for. They do the reverse also. If the population declines, then they will merge census tracts. So that's how we get the decimals. And you may have breaks in the sequence of numbers as well because of that. So here's a map that shows our census tracts in Oklahoma. There's 1,205 at the last census. And you can if you kind of look at them, you can see it kind of shows population density in a way, because Tulsa and Oklahoma City, highly populated areas like that, have lots of tracts. And then you get out in the rural areas, where you get, sometimes a county only has 1 or 2 tracts for the entire county. Okay, moving on. Census tracts are sometimes broken down into block groups, which are an intermediate category between the tract and the block. So I mentioned the block is the smallest level of aggregation, but sometimes they add a block group, and so they'll add one more number to the geo ID to designate block group. Usually block groups in a tract, I don't think I've ever seen more than 4 or 5. So they only need 1 digit for that. And all the blocks that we're going to see in that tract are going to start with that same block group number. So where I live, my block group is number 3. So you can see the geo ID listed there. And here's a map of the block groups. And so we got 3,374 in Oklahoma. It's almost 3 times the number of tracts. And again, you can see, we're getting finer and finer divisions. And then the last one, we'll jump down here to census blocks. And these are the smallest areas. And usually, at least in the urban areas, they will correspond directly to 1 block, what's surrounded by 4 streets on one side. And you can see we have a great many of those here in the state, 180,000 plus in Oklahoma. And you can see the geo ID, each block in a tract gets a unique number that is a 4-digit number. So there's apparently up to 10,000 possibilities in a census tract for the number of blocks. So you can see there, my block is 3013. So the total geo ID there would be 4014300690133013, right? So that's a big, long number, but that's a unique identifier. And these are very important and useful because we'll be using them to link the geography to the tables of data that we download from the Census Bureau, and we'll use them as our primary keys in our databases. So you say, well, where can I get this geography? You get it from the Census Bureau. And I'm going to switch my share here so that you can see the website where we can get the data here. Okay, and so this is the census.gov geography page, and their shape files are what contain the different geography, and it's called the Tiger/line or Tiger Line program. And if you go here, you can download shape files, and they're listed by year. I think it goes back to about 2006, and then goes back to 2000 and 1992 for the two previous decennial censuses. And they have FTP site, so you can go like by state, and we'll look here. Yeah, so it's listed by state, and then you go to Oklahoma. FTP, by the way, for those who may not know, it's a file transfer protocol site. So we can go down, and you can see here that the data is listed by county, GeoID. 40143 would be Tulsa. And then you can see here, okay, well, here are the different shape files available in Oklahoma. And they're zip files, and they usually contain more than one file. And when you download a shape file for use in GIS, it will come with some helper files. It will come with a DBF file, which is the attribute table. It will come with a CGM file and maybe a projection file for the mapping. And it may come with a layer file, other helper files. So you got to be sure that you download all of them and use them together, move them around together and store them together. So when you try to open up the shapefile, it will have all the support files that it needs. Now, if we go back, I'm going to go back here to 2018. What you will find is that they also have a web interface for some of these older data sets that is a little easier to use. And you can kind of specify what you want here. So if we want, 2018 data, and we want all the blocks, we can hit submit here, and it will take us to the states. And then you say, okay, I want Oklahoma, and then after you have that, you hit download, and it will create the file. So it's a little easier to use than the FTP site, but it's basically the same thing. And as I mentioned earlier, the boundaries for these geographies change. So if you're using different data from different years, you may need to use different shape files, or you may not if it didn't change, but you should always check and see. Okay, now let's go back to our PowerPoint. So now I want to talk about some of the additional geographies out there that are sort of off of the main stem there hierarchy. And what's really of interest to us here is urban and rural areas. So the Census Bureau classifies that. They use a definition that's, interestingly enough, based on housing unit density. So basically areas with 425 housing units per square mile, right? In a census block, that's the primary criteria for something being classified urban. It also must have a minimum threshold of 2,000 housing units or 5,000 people within a contiguous area. Over on the right-hand side of the screen here, you see all of Oklahoma's urban areas. I think there's 52, if I count right. And then this map shows their location. And if you got more than 10,000 people, they're showing what is called the urbanized area, the built up area. So areas like Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Norman, Enid, Lawton, Fort Smith, Arkansas is on there, et cetera, right? You can see those are kind of irregular shape. Those have urbanized areas. If you're an urban area with less than 10,000, they just show it as a dot. So for instance, Guthrie or Idabel, or Henrietta, they're just shown as a dot. Now, moving on, the Census Bureau also aggregates data for what they call statistical areas, and these are they come in different flavors. But what we're interested in is the core-based statistical areas that are collectively metro areas and micropolitan statistical areas. And I've got the definitions up here, but basically, they both have to have a population of at least 10,000 in an urban cluster. And metro areas have at least 50,000 people. Micropolitan areas have 10,000, but less than 50,000. And they usually, will include adjacent counties, or you'll have like a central county where the main city is, and then you'll have outlying counties if they're interacting. In other words, where like a quarter of the people are commuting into the central city to work. That will get you included as part of the statistical area. The last thing I'll mention is they also sometimes combine statistical areas where there's an employment interchange of 15 or more. And I'm not exactly sure how they calculate this employment interchange measure, so the number 15, I don't know what that means, but basically what it means is you have some core areas that are close to one another, and they're interacting together. And we have some of each of these in Oklahoma, so I'm going to show you the map here. And so there's basically in Oklahoma there are 5 metropolitan areas: Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Lawton, Enid, and then Fort Smith, Arkansas, where Sequoyah County is an outlying county to that metro area. We also have 17 micropolitan statistical areas like Guymon, Woodward, Weatherford, Shawnee, Muskogee. You can see them there. And we also have several combined statistical areas. So Oklahoma City, Shawnee is a metro and a micro area in a combined statistical area. Tulsa, Muskogee, Bartlesville. So Tulsa is a metro area, and then we have 2 micropolitan areas, Muskogee and Bartlesville, that are part of that combined statistical area. Miami and Joplin are a combined statistical area, and then I already mentioned Fort Smith, which is a metro area. The one I'm forgetting, Durant, down there is Bryan County is part of Dallas-Fort Worth combined statistical area. It's curious, Ardmore and Love counties are not yet part of Dallas-Fort Worth, so they must not meet that 15 employment exchange parameter, but I would expect that is probably something in the offing. Now, I want to talk about places. And so places, also known as cities and towns for the most part, right? They also come in several varieties. So there's incorporated places. These are cities and towns that are incorporated and provide government functions, and are, ubiquitous in Oklahoma and elsewhere. We also have census designated places, and these are sort of the unincorporated counterparts, right, of places that are, meet a lot of the same definitions or requirements as an incorporated place, but they haven't been legally incorporated. Tribal agglomerations often fit into this category. So here in Oklahoma, we have quite a few census designated places. And I'll show you the map here. These are all the different incorporated places and census designated places. They're not differentiated on the map. Basically, you can see how many are clustered around Tulsa and Oklahoma City. But then you can also see there's a big cluster here in the northeast portion of the state. And I suspect most of these are tribal designated places. Places also have GeoID. They get a 5-digit number and so you can have, again, up to 100,000 of these in a state. So you can see you still have the 40 and then the 5-digit number. This happens to be the GeoID for the city of Tulsa. And then the last census geography I want to talk about is the zip code tabulation area. These roughly correspond to zip codes, right? And so this is a mapping aggregation done on the national level. And basically, it doesn't exactly fit the zip codes. So, you may have some zip codes with no residences. They're just being used for business purposes. So they don't show up. You also, might have zip codes that do not, directly correspond to the census geography. So they are approximations using the census geography, the census blocks, in other words. We've got 666 zip code tabulation areas in Oklahoma. I hope that does not bode well as an evil number. And then the GeoID, it's very simple. It's whatever the zip code is the GeoID. And they just use a 5-digit number nationwide, as we do in the Postal Service. I don't know how frequently we would use this geography, but I do know that in the OFA guidelines, there's at least one parameter that was identified by zip code tabulation area. So I thought I'd show it to you. We may use it a little bit. Okay, so that gives you a good kind of overview of the census geography. To close here, I want to talk about primary market area. So in one of our recent meetings with Daryl Beavers and OFA, we had a lengthy discussion to try to define primary market area. And here's the working definition that we have. So if you're building a project and you want to do a market analysis, you have to identify the primary market area. And we identified how to do that for our purposes. And we broke it down into 3 procedures based on the size of the city that you're dealing with. So for the large metro areas, this would be Oklahoma City and Tulsa only. You would locate the project site, right? So here's a map of Tulsa. Here's a project location, which happens to be pretty close to our OU Tulsa campus. And then what we did is calculate a 15-minute commuting distance from the site. That's this jaggedy red line here. Now, we did this using ArcGIS and an extension of ArcGIS called Network Analyst. And, it's a more advanced feature. So, I haven't showed it to you yet, but we may look at it at one of these future lessons. But basically, that's a 15-minute drive from this project location to any of these areas inside the red boundary. What we then did is intersect that service area with the census tracts, and we got this sort of salmon color, which is what we're defining as the primary market area. So if you're doing a market analysis for this project site, you would use all the data in these census tracts. So I think that should be pretty clear and simple to understand. It's a little bit different when you're dealing with the smaller metro areas and micropolitan areas. So here we're talking about the smaller metro areas, Lawton, Enid, Fort Smith, Arkansas, and then all of the micropolitan areas in the state. And so this is an example from Altus, a town in the southwest part of the state. And so, again, what you do is you locate the project site, but then this time we're going to identify the city limits or the limits of the place of the primary city, which that being Altus, of course. Most of these would be very easy to figure out. They're usually, they're designated as the key city to the micropolitan area. And then we intersect that with the census tracts. And so you can see, again, this would be our primary market area. And some of these census tracts now are quite large, unlike maybe what we're dealing with in the metro area. This one I think is about 40 square miles. And so you can contain a larger area. I think it's worth pointing out that we do have Fort Smith, which crosses the state line. And if we're doing a market analysis for a property that's in Oklahoma, but it's part of Fort Smith metropolitan area, then we're going to have to include some data from the state of Arkansas. I don't think that's necessarily a big issue, but when we're collecting the data, we'll have to be sure that we include Oklahoma, and a small portion of the state of Arkansas, probably at least one, maybe more counties. I'll have to check on that. Okay, and then lastly, if you're not in a metropolitan or micropolitan area, you're in a rural area. And so this is relatively straightforward. There's 40 counties that are not part of a metro or micro area. And so if we look at this example, we'll pick a project located in the city of Colgate, which is in Cole County. We drop down the dot, and then we just identify, hey, what county are we in? And then we take the census tracts that are in that county, and that is the basis for our market analysis. So I hope that kind of, clarifies some of the issues that we have with census geography, because we will be using a lot of census data in the project going forward.